Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back again. We're joined this afternoon by Alistair Higgs, who is he works for Rainbird, and he is the area manager for Europe, as far as I know. You'll be able to correct me on that, Alistair. And he's going to be talking about irrigation, as you can see, something we discussed in the previous presentation by Stuart Langhorne, the course manager at Beaconsfield. And the importance of water management. And with Stuart, we discussed a little bit on both sides of the equation, the drainage as well. But this will mostly be about the irrigation. So without any further ado, I will hand you over to Alistair.
Thanks, Gavin. Afternoon, everybody, or might be early evening. Hope you're enjoying the online platform. Getting to see everyone's front room. I think one person was in the golf club. I think I saw one person in the golf club. So this is my my office. So hopefully it will come across okay. Is it going to work? Yeah. We've got to click. Since every time I run a presentation in Zoom, I seem to have to click something different to get it to move slides. So I do apologise. So yeah, just quickly introduce myself. I don't think I've met any of you before. If I have, then I apologise for being not quite Europe, Gavin, but yeah, so I look after UK, Ireland and Iceland for Rainbird as district golf manager. So I've been in the golf business since '99. I went straight in after I left school, predominantly turf management background, but I've done a diploma in club management and was a course manager myself for 9 years. Then I joined Rainbird in 2016, so 4 years ago, firstly as a product specialist, so essentially supporting the product in the field, and then after 18 months was made district manager, sort of covering Northwest Europe effectively. And my main role day in, day out is to support our distributors who sell our product and the people who install it, and ultimately support the wider industry on the best practice of using water. One slide about Rainbird. Obviously, I think it'd be a bit naive of me not to at least push Rainbird at least once in the presentation. So hopefully you've heard of Rainbird as a brand. If not, we are exclusively an irrigation manufacturer. So we produce products effectively to deliver water where God doesn't provide it, effectively to enable a plant or an activity to take place successfully as was required for that area of business effectively. So in golf, obviously it's quite obviously generally for the turf grass plant, but we're in irrigation in every form of irrigation, from dust suppression through football pitches, residential, agriculture, drip line irrigation, etc. So I just specifically work for the golf business unit. And as Rainbird, we are a strategic partner with the GCMA. So we see it really important for us to motivate and help support the industry to best support intelligent use of water, because there's never been so much pressure on so little water in the world. And as an industry, as golf industry especially, the expectations of our customer is going up and up and up and up, and the pressure on the resources to deliver it is getting more and more and more. So that's why it's vitally important that we see our role as a manufacturer to help support the education industry. I suppose that's why we're here today. So that's a little bit about Rainbird. Clearly my details will be at the end, so if anyone wants any specific Rainbird information, then clearly reach out outside of this platform. So today we've got, in essence, there's 3 presentations effectively we're going to do today. I've never done them back to back before, so we'll see how long it takes, and we'll see if I double up on anything. But we'll very much quickly start with why there is irrigation in golf, what its role is effectively in golf. We'll then look at real basic principle, understand what a golf irrigation system looks like in the world, especially focusing on what a sort of members golf club 3/4 of the way up the spectrum system would look like in the UK. And then effectively how to work out what irrigation is required at your club, so a roadmap. So hopefully you'll get some basic understanding why it's important to you, your customer, and then at the end of it is how you assess it and how you go forward with that at your club. So at any point, if you've got any questions, just please raise your hand. Hopefully it will avoid us having to jump back through slides later on. So what does golf need? Hopefully you've all got your own ideas on this, and hopefully you're all shouting things out like, normally people shout out things like grass and water at this point because they think I'm talking about irrigation, but reality is we need happy golfers. That's in a nutshell. As an industry, we've never been under so much pressure to deliver a product. It's never been so easy to put Lycra on, has it, and go out on your bike on a Sunday morning instead of go to the golf club. So what do we need to do to keep customers coming back, deliver a good customer experience? So holistically, from a golf course point of view, there's many great golf courses out there, well designed for a specific customer base or for a range of customers. But it's important they play as they're designed through good agronomy, which I'm sure Stuart has really driven in to you guys in the last section, hour and a half. And it's short-termism is great, but it's obviously long-term business management. There's no point having a great customer experience for 1 year with a golf course that plays really well, and then the year after you can't afford to do it. So it's got to be well-conducted business management. And the most important cog in the wheel, and I think you hopefully all agree, is the resources. And be that actually, I'll put my phone on, that's good, isn't it? Be that actually the most important number one cog is staff. People make the difference in the customer experience. Well-trained, well-educated, experienced staff who deliver the smile. And that's what delivers a good customer experience. And it could be that it's your golf course that's smiling as opposed to just the individual themselves. So that's what we're holistically working for. So this slide, I'm sure, is pretty much the subjects you've covered in the last webinar, hopefully. All of them has got to be combined and all must be used efficiently and effectively to deliver that customer experience you're after. So hopefully we're going to focus on obviously the hydration subject, but hopefully you link it back to your previous education as well. So how is water required? Just as an example here, it's quite clear that at certain times in the year, example here is, can you see how the water is being applied to that area is affecting the playability or the ability to play from the full range of golf course? So in this scenario, the hole is playing back towards us, and because of the poor turf quality at the front of the ladies' tee, or the furthest forward tee, if you like, the tee markers are having to be put towards the back of the tee to maintain some sort of condition for play. That's affecting the golfer. And that's all coming down to how that irrigation is set up. Think about the slide about customer experience. Do you think this golf hole plays as the designer intended? Where do we think the ball's going to end up if you end up 5 yards short of that green? Way through the back. Hopefully, does everyone play golf or understand that would be the case? Just nod if you believe that is the case. So, but that golf course is clearly spending a lot of money on its business management to maintain a product. You don't get stripes in that semi-rough in dusty conditions like that unless you're running around on a £45,000 mower 3 times a week. So with some maybe tweaks to the business management, potentially spend the same amount of money, you could majorly change the way that golf course plays and the experience of that customer. Or if you extended that irrigation out by 20 yards out the front of that green, maybe reduce the semi-rough to 1 stripe instead of 2, you could spend the same amount of money per year and deliver a very different product throughout the whole year from a customer experience point of view. Obviously, water's got a large a role to play, not just in how a golf course plays, but also the condition of the plant surfaces. So all turf or grass or all plants, all living things are reliant on the soil structure below them. And the ideal soil structure of 25% air, 25% water, and 50% minerals is what every turf manager or greenkeeper is striving to maintain to deliver the healthy conditions. And every time you don't have that perfect, you're having to overcorrect with another activity, be it a chemical or extra cultural practices to alleviate the fact that you're overwatered or underwatered. I think that picture is pretty striking. So this is a golf course in Scotland, entry-level members golf course, very old established club. That's a year apart after an irrigation system is installed. So, you know, many people say, oh, we don't need irrigation in Scotland. But the reality is when it comes to delivering a customer experience consistently and attracting members or avoiding members from leaving and going up the road, nothing does transform a golf course like water. So now we know that, or now hopefully you realise that you need to water to create the right playing experience, create the right environment for your turf plant to survive and thrive. How long should you irrigate? Now that is the question that gets asked time and time again every day in maintenance complexes up and down the UK and around the world. How long should we irrigate for? But the real question should be, how much water should I give? Because I've never seen minutes run out the end of drainage pipes. I've never seen minutes fall out of the sky. But it's actually quite sad that 90% of irrigators around the world actually replace water in time instead of in volume, even though the requirement would be in volume. So that's an interesting question to ask the staff at your club where you're currently working or where you'd like to work, is how much water, how long do you put it on for at night? And if they're answering in volume, then you're halfway there to put in efficient irrigators. Because in 2018, European Institute of Golf Course Architects, which is a bit of a mouthful, but it's essentially where all the golf course architects that design golf courses, it's their version of the GCMA effectively. Now in 2018, they wrote obviously 2 or 3 articles around the role of irrigation, especially prominent in 2018, and it's such a hot year. And it stated that without efficient irrigation, greens and fairways are overwatered by 30 to 50%. When you consider the effect that could have on your customer, your bottom line, and your surfaces, it's quite an alarming stat. And just as an industry, to think that we're overwatering by 30 to 50% is actually quite a scary thought when you consider we're trying to survive amongst many others. So, true fact is that if you have an irrigation system, it costs money. Watering costs money. That's fact. So there is a fixed, or there is a necessity for that cost, whether that's through water or electricity or manpower to service and maintain that irrigation system. Whether you have a small system or a big sophisticated system, it's still got costs associated to it. Incorrect watering or inefficient watering costs a hell of a lot more to your business. So purely from a bottom line point of view, should be driving irrigation efficiency. How does it do that? Leaching of nutrients. So an overwatering, simply running the same 5-minute program every night, will wash your nutrients through your soil profile quicker. So you'll end up reapplying more fertilizer, more chemicals than you need to by over applying water. Or it can wash products through the profile instead of being taken up by the leaf. I'm not sure whether Stuart spent much time talking about pesticides or fungicides, but funguses are effectively that live in the turf and eat the turf roots and kill the grass. So if you've heard of Fusarium being mentioned, these kind of things, by overwatering or underwatering, you're creating an environment which attracts the pests and funguses, which are the nasty pesticide chemicals that the greenkeepers have to use to rid those of them. But when you're spending £750 to £1,000 a time per fungicide, it really is important not to try and create that. Add an additional time and labour, which I'm assuming every golf club's highest cost is going to be their labour element in their budget. Runoff damages hardscape and other features. So every day, every morning after you've irrigated, if you've got runoff, you're going to have some bunkers that have got to be affected by moisture or by irrigation. First group out in the morning is going to know which bunkers play wet and which bunkers play dry. There's no reason for that other than the fact the irrigation is set up inefficiently. Or paths getting washed down every night. Poor public relations. If you've just recently told the membership the money's running a bit low, or they can't have some capital expenditure, and then the irrigation's still running when it's raining, when they're watching rain hitting the side of the clubhouse and the putting green irrigation comes on, that goes down particularly well. Or obviously also the wider public relations during periods of hosepipe ban, etc. To be a luminous green at that point maybe isn't the best option. Maybe irrigating just to keep your plant alive might be a better or wider public relation, better tool for you. And I think that previous slide illustrated this point well. Non-intended design. Is your playing customer, your golfer, going to enjoy playing your golf course? And if the irrigation is not efficient or not used wisely, then it will change the way the course plays. It will play too soft, or it will play too hard, or there won't be grass where there should be grass, which gives you inferior playing conditions. So I'm going to ask you a question, see if someone can come back with the answer. What's unique about golf compared to any other sport? Anyone got any ideas? What's unique about golf?
Is it how much space we need, or how much grass area we need to make it happen?
Okay, yeah, that's good. So it's different to some sport, a lot of sports. The most different thing about golf is it's the only sport where we maintain and play at the same time. You think about Wimbledon, and they just said when the members are having their Wednesday afternoon knock-up, they're just going to move the baseline in by 5 yards today because we need to maintain it. It's just not going to happen, is it? Whereas golf, you're maintaining it in amongst the golfers on a daily basis. So, and because of irrigation being so disruptive, golf won't accept irrigation through the day. So I don't know many staff that are going to want to work all night every night. It's okay in a short period for hand watering to happen during the day, but your customer's only going to put up with that for so long. They may well do it in a real extreme heat period on the greens, but we're having more and more extreme heat. So periods of hand watering are becoming more prolonged. So more reliable core infrastructure setup can reduce this requirement. So rather than being a relied upon tool, it's a top-up tool instead of. But I do like that, Stacey. That's a really good answer. It's very true that our sports turf managed area is extremely expensive pro rata per player than it is for other industries. So it is an industry issue that you compare us to a cricket club or football club where they can have 6 or 7 pitches, which realistically equates to 2 or 3 holes and have the same amount of players play on it every day. It's that's a definite. I suppose that's why golf club memberships are so expensive ultimately compared to others. So with efficient irrigation and very importantly, it's to be reliable and be trusted by your turf manager. He can maintain your golf course on the edge or at the point of efficiency more often. So he can fertilise when he wants. He can apply wetting agent when he wants. He can use minimal pesticides. And I think quite crucially as well is that with efficient irrigation, you'll have to do less disruptive cultural practices. So if your irrigation is efficient, you won't have to do so much aeration, which is what, or top dressing, which is what affects your golfers when they come in moaning. And also you can create the right playing conditions for the customer of the day. So we always used to, if you have a reliable irrigation system, you can dry the course out a little bit more, knowing that you can bring it back whenever you want, because you've got control at your fingertips. So you can dry out a bit for the scratch medal come the weekend, and then you can deep water the day before the seniors' day on the Wednesday, so that they have a slightly slower golf course the next day, which preferably is maybe preferable to them anyway. So the two main questions for a general manager effectively is, it's not obviously going to be about how to set a sprinkler up or anything like that, but it should really be you should know how your system affects your customer. And then, is your system as it is currently set up and running efficiently? They're the two questions that I think are the most important questions, and every GM should be able to answer that, or to be able to ask his course manager to get the answer. So really, to get those two questions, is you've got 5 really that sort of follow those up, which is, how much does your irrigation cost your club each year? Now it sounds silly, but you'd be surprised how little clubs can actually give you identify that as an identifiable number, despite the large effect it has on their customer or their bottom right hand corner. What do you spend, if anything, on preventative maintenance and upgrades, i.e. checking the system once a month to make sure it's on point, or servicing the existing equipment, or even potentially regular upgrades of different elements? Just as a hint, that's not very much for most clubs. It's more reactive. And how does your club measure water and electricity? I'd say the majority of clubs in the UK are still actually not identifying that as a number separately, and they will wait till the water bill to come, and then if it's a bit high, allocate some to the greenkeeping budget, as opposed to having a separate meter, which makes it on point, and doesn't have to be a separate bill, but actually having a separate meter, an electricity meter that links that to the in the P&L to the irrigation and to the golf course maintenance budget, will allow you to make actual decisions, business decisions going forward. I'm not sure if you've had a food and beverage session yet, have you, Gavin, or not? Not yet. Well, I bet you every single golf club in the UK, you could walk into the bar and you could find out how many pints of beer were wasted in the last day, the last week, the last month. How many of them could tell you how much irrigation water was wasted last night? I'll leave it to you whether you think which one's got the most influence on the bottom right-hand corner or the customer. And what's your approach to risk management and disaster plan? I.e., do you have a disaster plan for the irrigation system? Nothing's given us disaster plans like COVID this year. So, i.e., which areas are you going to downgrade first, etc., if you start to run low on water, or if you have a water source cut, if your water source gets polluted. So come back. Yeah. Water source being polluted. Often you hear someone say, oh, I don't have to pay for my water because I've got a borehole or an abstraction license, which means you pay a set fee a year for a certain amount of allowance rather than on tap water. But what happens if that water source becomes polluted in June and you've still got 3 months of irrigation, 4 months potentially of irrigation to go? Do you know how much it would cost you to irrigate at the same rate with mains water? And if you do, if your golf club can afford just to absorb another 20 or 30,000 pounds, great, and nice businesses to work in. But if you can't, then obviously you need to have a plan of attack where you're not going to do something else, or you're going to do less irrigation. Also, some of the large component parts in the irrigation system, or key components like a pump, for instance, isn't going to be on the shelf and arrive tomorrow. So if your pump goes down, who do you call? Where does it come from? And what's the lead time? And then you can make some sustainable decisions on whether you should have a spare one sat ready to go just in case. And then obviously, if you know all the questions to the ones above, then you can look at new technologies and how you could drive efficiency. But you can't do that until you understand how much it's costing you to run the one you've got now. So that slide there is probably your go-to slide, I would say. So the role of irrigation in golf is to maximize all inputs. So that's every time you put some seed down, you want 100. If you put £100 of seed down in 2 months' time, you want as much of that £100 to still be growing in the ground. The same with anything else you put down. Improve the efficiency of the green staff, improve the condition and playability of the course, and ultimately, everything in golf should come back down to the experience of our customer, the player. And in Rainbird, we have a trademark, which is the intelligent use of water. And in golf, that's the 4 points that we highlight as the intelligent use of water. So that's Happy Golf has been delivered a good customer experience. So hopefully I've linked those 4 points round with water. I think that's the end of the why irrigation in golf section. I think I started 5 minutes late, so we've got some minutes for some questions, if there's any for this section.
I've got a question. It might sound a really stupid question, but again, this isn't really an area I'm very knowledgeable on. Would like a course turn their irrigation off for like to earlier? Or what's the guy? Is it Stuart who came on? Is it Stuart?
Yeah.
He, like during January and February had loads of days of rain. So like for that period, would he completely turn his irrigation off?
Yeah. So irrigation is effectively a tool for supplementary water. Obviously, different parts of the world, you require water for a greater part of it. You know, if you go to Dubai, for instance, they'll be irrigating twice a day, 360 probably out of 365 days. Mm-hmm. Whereas I'd say in the UK, you're looking at maybe 12 weeks use spread over 6 months.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We often get 10 days of dry like we are now, for instance, and then you get maybe 5 days where you get some rain, you don't need to use it.
I think the other question like linked to that is, and what the presentation earlier was, some courses only have it on tees or greens or whatever, but some have it on the everywhere. So does it need to be on? If clubs had a limited, an unlimited budget, would they have it everywhere? Or is it a case of like some clubs absolutely need it and some don't on certain sort of parts? Does that sort of make sense?
It does make sense, yeah. It's probably like any other tool. I think if your resources needs to match your target customer or your target business, whichever way you want to look at it, and yeah, it stands to reason the further up, the more expensive for customer experience you're trying to create, probably the more, because it's a maintenance tool. So sometimes you might only use it 4 times a year, but if you're right at the top end, if you're 4 times a year not delivering the right customer experience, could be enough to really disrupt your business. Whereas, so generally, the more high profile the club, the more areas that get covered. That's probably fair to say.
That's helpful, thank you.
No problem. Okay, cool. So we'll go on to the how, yeah? Okay, so this is the section Gavin said, make sure you put something in that's a bit geeky. So hopefully I'll go through slow enough. And if you don't understand it, it's Gavin's fault. So you can have a go at him when I'm finished. Basically, this is just hopefully just to these lot of words that if you're already a general manager or going to be, that you might hear said by your green staff or the like. So just maybe having an overview or 10 slides that you could refer to in the future that you can think, oh, where does that fit in the system, or when they're talking about, so understanding what's critical and what's not is really important. So irrigation is a combination of pumps and water, and by water we mean water source. Hydraulics means all the pipes. Then we have irrigation equipment, so the valves and the rotors, the things that open and shut out on the course and put water out, the squirters, if you like. Then we have controls, so how we control the irrigations, control systems. And then we have all the add-on bits and bobs that can help the turf manager or help the irrigation system adjust to what's applied, where and when and what's needed. They're sort of ancillary equipment. So this is, in answer to Stacey's question, I would say this is a fairly typical southeast of England members club where you would probably expect to see fair irrigation. And the further north you go, probably the more premier that would be, kind of thing. And the absolute ultimate premier clubs would have triple or quadruple row fairway, including covering walkways, bunker surrounds, etc., etc. So this, just for the example of this presentation, I've gone for sort of an entry members golf club, double row fairways, where we have a water source down the bottom here, a pipe network going around the course, but we have the controller located in the Greenkeeps complex. And what we'll do is hopefully we'll work our way through the different parts of the system, and then we'll bring it back to there and show you where they all sit. So first and foremost, it starts off with the water source itself. Probably the most underlooked element of the water is filtration. Based on, it's often the thing that gets cut from a specification, but for the next 30 years, that water source that you've got is what's providing your system with water. So if it's not filtered, it's going to affect the working parts of the system, or potentially even affect the turf quality over a good period of time. So yeah, filtration is certainly something, whether that's source-based filtration or exit-based, to remove particles or to remove from dragging in algae. So this type of setup with a reservoir base like this, where that's filled from a number of sources, whether abstraction or from rainfall or borehole. But what you hopefully need to be seeing there is clear water and not covered up with all sorts of nasty algae and plants and whatever else. So you really want to be seeing some sort of aeration there, keeping that moving. And I think if you're ever somewhere that gets the opportunity to put in a reservoir, that is extremely good return on investment. And if you know how much the system's costing you, that's where you can start doing those sums. But 100% they shouldn't be part of the golf course, because come the end of the summer, they're stinky holes and they're not presentable. They should be in a non-presentable area. From there, the water source will sometimes be moved into what we call a storage tank or transfer tank. So you may well have a reservoir which is located at the far end of the golf course. The water then gets pumped up to the holding tank. These tanks generally hold a night's worth of water. And then we'll have a booster pump set which boosts and pushes the water around the network. But this is where all the main pressure is set and the flow, etc. And these are vital parts. Without this pump station working, you can have the biggest reservoir in the world, but if you can't pump it around the course, you're not going to be able to apply it. So this is your number one critical part. This is your high expense part. And this is the one where I was referring to of how much it costs and where's it going to come from. And you can see they're almost always bespokely made. The combination of the different bits anyway. So you normally be on a 3 to 6 week lead time on a full pump set, potentially at least 2 weeks on just a standalone pump. So middle of July, that's a critical component for your course. Once we leave the pumps, we start pumping around pipe networks. I think really, without getting complicated, obviously it starts off bigger pipe and goes smaller as you get out to the extremities of the course to maintain the required flow and pressure. And I think the other thing to say about pipes is that now since around 2000, year 2000, the industry moved to using polyethylene pipe, which is what pipes get used for gas under their own main roads. So you see, the yellow pipe you see in cores that when you see roadworks going on, that's the same material that we're using in irrigation now. So it's got a lifetime expectancy of, well, the gas board would say 50 years, but we all know what the gas board's like. So maybe 30 to 40 years would be a sensible lifespan on PE pipe. So whenever you put pipe in, you want to make sure that you put something in that's going to be last the lifetime of or meet the expectations in the next 30, 40 years of the business and not just the next 5 years. Once you put one size pipe in, it's much cheaper to put in a bigger size pipe once than try and put two sizes of pipes in twice. Previous to 2000, we used to use PVC pipe and use glued joints, so very brittle. And after, basically, the moment you glue the joint, the glue is it's actually eating the pipe. So it's starting to fail from the moment you put it in. And that would have had about a 20 to 25 year lifespan, absolute tops on a good design before it actually starts affecting the business. So you're seeing many joints and fittings here. I think you can see my mouse, but I'm circling. This is a electrofusion joint. So it's actually welding the joints together with PE pipe every 500 meters or every 100 meters, as opposed to every 50 meters with a glued joint on a PVC system. So if you arrive at a club and they've still got a PVC system, that should be big alarm bells for you to think that this needs to be top of the agenda. Once we get to we've got isolation points on the main line, and also at the back of every green or every tee or every fairway, you'll see an isolation point. These are serviceable items that need to be working. Okay, none of this is Rainbird equipment, but these are your most important bits, because if something goes wrong on a green on a Saturday morning, i.e. you've got a burst, if your isolation point behind that green isn't usable anymore and it's been in there 20 years and degraded away and you haven't done any proactive maintenance, then you've got to now drain down the whole system to repair it. So maybe that means you can't irrigate for the next 2 days while you wait for the bit to turn up. So these 20 or 30 pound components behind each green or behind every fairway are a vital piece of equipment. And then the last bit of pipe is the swing pipe, which actually goes up and joins up to the sprinkler or the control valve. So this is a control valve where we have water coming in, fully pressurized at one point here. The valve opens up and water flows to the water station. If you open up a box on the course, it'll look a bit something like that. I would quite expect many golf courses to not be quite as neat, clean and tidy as that, but it's a good picture. That's best practice. That's it, that is. But you'll often see something that looks very different to that. Very different indeed. So hopefully this will work. Now this is the geeky moment. Gavin got excited when I showed him this video. So how does a solenoid valve work? I apologise for the cheesy American accent, but
have you ever wondered how irrigation control valves work? First, let's take a look at the various parts of a valve. Here's a reverse flow irrigation valve that is in the closed position. The basic elements are the body, including the inlet, the outlet, and the valve seat, the bonnet and bonnet chamber, diaphragm, pilot flow filter, solenoid, and the solenoid dump port. Water naturally flows into the inlet side of the valve, which is most often located on the side opposite the solenoid. Water fills the bonnet chamber above the diaphragm via the pilot flow filter, and the force of this water pressing down on the diaphragm holds the diaphragm in place. Notice that the larger surface area of water on the top side of the diaphragm has more force pressing down to close the valve. versus the force on the bottom of the diaphragm pushing up to open the valve. There is also a path for water to fill the solenoid. The flow of water is stopped from flowing out the solenoid dump port by the solenoid plunger seal, which is attached to the bottom end of the solenoid plunger. When the irrigation controller sends electricity to the valve solenoid, the solenoid coil becomes an electromagnet, pulling the plunger up into the solenoid, which allows the water in the solenoid and bonnet chamber to flow into the outlet of the valve. This lower pressure above the diaphragm allows the high inlet water pressure to push the diaphragm up, which allows water to flow through the valve. Once the flow of electricity to the solenoid stops, the plunger drops inside the solenoid, and the water stops flowing in the solenoid dump port. Eventually, the bonnet chamber water pressure becomes high enough to offset the water pressure below the diaphragm, and the valve closes.
Tests at the end. So a little bit geeky, but I think it just showed that there's quite a lot of infrastructure involved in the system, and actually how a valve actually opens and shuts, and that's where it's completely pressurized. So a solenoid valve like that would be running a station of block control. By block, that means rotors like these two, for instance, that would make the whole green come up and down, or the whole T, or potentially 5 or 6 rotors on a fairway, or the whole of a lawn. So you have control over a whole area at once, where versus you see the 2 rotors on the left are what we call valve in head. So at the bottom of a valve in head rotor, you'll see very similar. This is like the diaphragm and the valve down here. So we actually have what we just saw on a video at each head or each rotor. So you have individual head control. So on a green, you could water a bit more on the front left, or on the fairway, you could water the high points, not so much as so more than the low points, etc. So obviously you're increasing your ability to micromanage your golf course and create better facilities. So we've taken water all the way through the system now and out through the nozzle of the rotors. So now we have to control that. Medium, I would say the majority of golf course systems around the world, what I would say standard entry would be a basic PC system. And then up to the latest, I think it's not like in my, sorry about that. It's up to the latest controller, where you've effectively got a PC at every single point of control, valve, head, that talks directly backwards and forwards down the cable that runs around the golf course as a data bus to give you information about what's going in the field in real time. So you'll see, if any of your golfers will go abroad, you'll see this type of satellite in-field control. And then we have this cable goes all around the golf course, and you daisy chain lots of switches on it, which opens and shuts electricity to go into your controller. And then ultimately the latest ones where you've got a computer attached to each head or attached to each valve. So these are the controllers. This cable's going all around the course, and from the computer, you're going around the course and connecting to one of these 3 devices that will turn on and off all your valves. So again, this cable, bit like the pipe work, if you've got cable that's pre-2000 or pre-95, mid-90s was when irrigation companies started manufacturing purpose-made cable for the industry, for the irrigation industry. So before that, you know, it was a bit of BT cable from the hardware stock, and the reliability of that, the electrical, the jointing of a cable is what drives reliability. So if you've got a system that's been cut into, cut open, driven through, repaired with not correct waterproof burial joints, it's just a ticking time bomb before you lose your reliability. Then we have the other add-on items such as soil moisture sensing. So I don't know whether Stuart talked about soil moisture sensing. tool with like things like remote pogo, weather stations, which will give you live weather station data specific to your site. So you can start working in looking at ET, replacing ET, evapotranspiration, as opposed to just saying, I want to run a 5-minute program. This kind of thing can save you fortunes of money over the lifetime of the system. And these rain cans, they will measure 1/4 mil down to 1/4 mil measurement. Inside's like a tipping spoon, and that will interact with the system. So if you've gone home to irrigate 3 mil and 1 mil of rain occurs, it will actually pause the system, reduce all the run times to deliver a 2 mil application, so that your 3 mil that your turf manager wanted actually still goes on the ground. So your customer's going to get the right surfaces the next day. And obviously your pump set's going to run for a third of the time reduced. So your cost savings is going to be there as well. So these are the kind of things, the add-on technologies, the extras, if you like, that people often take out of projects, actually over the period of time, what makes the difference. And that's what enables the guys right at the top to deliver the best services. So hopefully we followed that. We started off with the water. So down at the bottom here with the reservoir, this is where all this is located. Down at the water source, you'll put your pump set down there. Sometimes we'll travel the water up to near the maintenance complex, but often the pump is housed with the water source. Then we take the pipes off around the golf course, which you're seeing here, traveling off. And every time there's a junction, you'll see maybe the line gets a bit smaller. That's because we're getting a bit smaller pipe. And you see every time you see this little symbol, kind of like an egg timer, that's an isolation valve. So that's one of these. That's the ability to isolate that part of the golf course. Again, you see it behind the green there. Then we've got the valves. So you'll see one there. It's covered up over there. So that's your block control. So you've got your solenoid valve like this one is there, and then you've got pop-up rotors, all 4 of them coming up at once, all 6 of them coming up at once. So we've got control ability to turn on. And then we've got valve in head. So every time you see the single dots, that's your valve in head control. Full circle on the fairways. And then round the greens here, what you're seeing is 2 dots. So you've got 1 head for water in the green and 1 head for water in the immediate area around the green. So they're on 180 degrees each. So you can water independently the different areas. And obviously it scales up from that. The more control you want, the more part circle you have, the more sprinklers you have, etc. Then we house the control system at the easiest point, which is obviously where your staff are housed, full PC-based system. But there you can control in real time from anywhere, from mobile devices, anywhere around the world, on a direct loop, internet loop into your controller. This blue cable goes everywhere that pipe goes pretty much. You see that anywhere there's a blue line, that's the control cable. And at each point there's a joint. We use these electrical joints. And this is certainly, if you're going to skimp and save, this is definitely not the area. Even if you've got an old system, using the best joints will really increase the life of your system. And at every point of control, we've got one of these. Either one of these for the whole hole, satellite located here, or potentially one here for the whole half of the golf course. Decoders, or your integrated control PC. And then up here we've got our weather station, soil moisture sensors, add-on items. And the one area that I didn't talk about was ancillary irrigation. So more often now we're getting dragged into conversations about how we irrigate specifically to specific areas like bunker banks, surrounds. So we're utilising other technologies like drip line irrigation to irrigate some of these really hard to irrigate areas without runoff, which they use such a low flow. It's a really efficient way of maintaining turf coverage on some of these like high profile south-facing banks, etc. Or potentially even around the clubhouse. Why are you paying for someone to walk around with a watering can all summer to do the hanging baskets when they could be part of the irrigation system for a few £100 for a control valve? So that was your a quick run round an irrigation system for a standard golf course. Did you enjoy that, Gav?
I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I didn't understand everything about that at all, and I'm not sure about everybody else, but I thought it was incredible. Anybody else? Any comments? maybe not quite as enthusiastic as I am, but I love that. I mean, I think that diagram that you have up at the moment, Alistair, is it really explains an awful lot about the golf course and your primary asset. I've seen a few diagrams like that on AutoCAD where you can actually zoom in and see exactly the location of your sprinklers. For anybody who does have an irrigation system on their golf course, you do need to know where the lines are and where the heads are, especially if you have events where they tend to put tents up and sort of hammering stuff into the ground. And if they hit one of the pipes, then you might have a bit of an accident. But an awful lot of that is underground, and you don't see it. So you walk around a golf club or around the clubhouse, and you can see where the money's being spent. Carpets, furnishings, tables, fancy chairs, all the rest of the stuff. A lot of this stuff you don't actually see, but it can be a huge expense. So I think really that what we were trying to do is to sort of highlight the major areas of expense within looking after a golf course. Irrigation is one of those. And these words will crop up in conversations at board levels. So it's it's a good way to start, and just to have an idea of the sort of terminology that they use within irrigation on that major cost center. So I thought that was really interesting. I know what the pumps, I know what they cost, and they're it's you've got to look after them, you've got to maintain them as well, because you just really can't let them go down. So I'll let Alistair continue on with that.
Sorry, I've just got a question. I've got a question about everything, but I'm just interested to learn more. I think that's really insightful, and I think, as I say, don't really know a huge amount about irrigation, so that's been really interesting. Whose responsibility is it to manage the elements of irrigation? Does it sit with the head greenkeeper, or is it the manager, or is it a bit of both? Whose responsibility is it to make sure that the systems are maintained and everything's kept up to date, and all kind of that side, really?
Generally that would fall to the head greenkeeper or course manager or whatever the job title is, but the person is your overriding turf manager. And the bigger the club, generally they'd have a specific person in the sub-management structure of that area of the club that would look after it. The same as you would with the machinery mechanic, for instance. But obviously as a normal golf club, shall we say, probably is literally being run and maintained by the head greenkeeper. But I think ultimately it's probably your biggest capital item owned by the golf club, running the biggest asset. So as a GM, having an understanding of where you are in that cycle and how well maintained it is, I think is quite an important item. But as that slide says, it's pretty simple really. It's just all we got to do is add the water. So don't know what you're moaning about, Gav. Does anyone need to grab a drink? Are we okay to press on with the last bit? I think we're on time schedule-wise. All good? Brilliant. So knowing that we need water, we need irrigation for our customer to give a good customer experience, and knowing that the basic of an irrigation system, or at least an understanding of how to potentially ask the question to your turf manager. How do we get happy golfers? That's really a question that I think every committee up and down the country is asking right now. They've all got to try and hold on to this little boom we've had when they all go back to work, or don't, so to speak. So we need a roadmap. Simple. So we're at the Golf Club Managers Association, and we want to go to Wembley. We want to work out how we're going to get there. So you need to know where you are and where you want to go. Simple as. I chose Wembley because I didn't want to get political and choose a high-profile golf club in case anyone was involved on the course. I think it's fair to say that Wembley's probably head of the football in the country, in the UK, isn't it? So, unless I've got any Scots on the call, then probably not. So, just before we look at a few more details, just wanted to see 2019, BEGA, which is the Greenkeepers version of the GCMA, they did an irrigation survey which was addressed to course managers and general managers in 2019. There's some real key things in there that are quite striking. So, water security, i.e. how reliable or as an industry. So 60% of the UK golf industry are utilising mains water as its primary source. Unbelievable. Now, the cost for a cube of mains water will be something between £1.15 and £2 a cube. If you've got a fairway system like we looked at before, double row fairway system, you'd expect to get a water bill for around £40,000 a year for that. So it starts to get interesting on whether it should be set up efficiently or not, just from a monetary point of view. And ultimately, is when we get a hosepipe ban, we're not excluded in golf. So that means 60% of the industry would be banned from irrigation from their primary source. And 40% utilise boreholes for irrigation or other water sources. 2/3 of clubs have systems from the last century. So we've got expensive water source and we've got systems that were servicing the needs of our customer from before 2000. So as an industry, we're in a situation where 45% of the systems are over 25 years old. So this is, if you do become a GM, or you already are, if you go through your career without having this conversation about an irrigation system, I think it'd be amazing just from looking at where the industry is now. So 2018, it was the best summer we've had since probably 2013. This year is actually running drier year to date than we were in 2018. Don't know if anybody is excited about that, but good job as well, as we've been in lockdown, and I've got 2 kids, so it's good job it's been dry and not wet. So effectively, how do we move, obviously, more towards more people up to this direction? And that's the journey that you as a club are going to have to decide how to go about, how you're going to move yourself from somewhere down here up towards this element. Would love to have been this guy in 2018. So when we decide, you can all tell where I live now, look, because the blue dots come up. But anyway, we want to go from A to B, but there's obviously more than one route. So how are you going to go about putting that system in place? How are you going to go about getting from A to B? You can always go in a straight line, or we can go off in different directions to get a better result. Ultimately, it's about having a bit of longevity. So this is the case. This is the club in Scotland, Auchterarder Golf Club, that you saw the slides from earlier on. And this is exactly what they did. They obviously got themselves into the point where maybe they should have really seen it coming a lot earlier. But what you saw that slide picture is, you know what, they ended up pulling it together in about 3 months, and that is probably the quickest I've ever seen actually get decent people around a table, come up with a scheme and come out the other side and actually go into the ground within 3 months of actually sort of kind of starting the conversation. Normally, you'll be a 2-year, the moment you start having this conversation at board level, for the system to be installed and completed, you're looking at 2 years. That'll be average. Often longer than that, because people all dither and dather, and you know it's a lot of it's a lot of money when it comes to irrigation systems. So these things very political. EGMs is pretty much standard for any irrigation decision, and obviously I don't know any member who's a paid member of staff who would have the unless they own the golf club as well, would actually have the rights to spend this kind of money. So it often leads to many things, including planning, can also be an issue. So yeah, Auchterarder Golf Club, GCMA, I think I had an article in the magazine about it. So the first thing to do is to evaluate the course's needs in-house. So does your current course, don't worry about irrigation, does it meet the members and visitors' expectations? And is there going to be any architectural changes in it to remain competitive? Because all these things have an influence on whether you're going to have to change your irrigation system, or potentially when you put one in, you have to allow for it to be the case. Any operational or regulatory changes, i.e. potentially your water source is going to be reduced by 50% in 5 years' time. Could be the case. Could be that you're going to double your green staff because you can afford to do it, and irrigation is not quite so important because you can have people running around with hoses all day. Probably not, but could be the case. And could any of these be solved with a better irrigation system? Could well be the case. So that's the first thing, is to evaluate where you are now. How are we going to get to where we're going to go? Then that's when I would say it's time to evaluate your irrigation system versus your evaluation of where you are now. So is your irrigation system capable of delivering the customer experience we're trying to deliver? So as a GCMA member, well, it's one of our partner benefits, is we will actually, Rainbird actually pay for a golf club to have that irrigation evaluation done by an independent person. So that's how important we feel that the industry needs to sharpen itself up, is that we'll pay for an independent person to come to site and give you a report on your system, versus where you are now, and obviously potentially where you describe where you want to be. Off the back of that, you'll get some good recommendations for moving forward. Because often what this sort of buzzword around at the moment is to create a master plan. I'm sure many golf clubs have got master plans for the next 5 years or next 20 years. And irrigation obviously needs to be part of that, an intrinsic part of it. So how do you create a master plan with a design and specification for your 20-year master plan? I think irrigation is quite unique because whatever you decide today is going to affect you for the next 30 or 40 years. There isn't many other things you spend money on as a GM, apart from maybe potentially building a whole clubhouse brand new, that's going to still be affecting the business in 40 years' time. Pretty much everything else, your carpets will be gone in 3, your machines will be gone in 5, 10 tops. So even bar refits happen a lot more often than irrigation systems. So researching the short and long-term requirements of the club is how you should go about it, and definitely doing less that's correct is much better than spending the same amount of money to cover more areas, ultimately not actually delivering what you want in the long term. Now, this is, I'll really stress this point, is choosing your team. Now, every single industry expert is an expert in their field. And if you put all your eggs in one basket and tell them to deliver the whole master plan, I would stress they'll probably end up doing what's best for them. So for me, bringing together a team of people that, if you're employing a golf course architect to redesign a hole, make sure that he's using an independent consultant to design the irrigation, and not just slapping it down and then in 10 years' time, when he's long gone, the hole looks great on day one, but when you've got an irrigation system that can't maintain it as it's intended to be designed. Or definitely have an independent consultant involved in any master plan, versus just putting all your trust in a contractor who will put in the fittings that suits him the best. And the dimensions that suit him the best, because he might have another job up the road that he can use that I can double up on the materials and get a better price, but it might not be appropriate to you. So yeah, putting together a team and making them work together with yourself as a big member of that team is a big plus, I would definitely say. And obviously, when it comes to selecting your irrigation manufacturer, I would say look at the total cost of ownership in relation to your cost of water and the quality of the products for the long period of time. Do many references, they're all out there. And whatever you put in the ground today, make sure it's compatible with what's coming along tomorrow, next year, in 10 years' time, 20 years' time. Because irrigation, as previously said, is a 25 to 30 year decision, not a 5-year decision. I think up until this point, the role of a GM is obviously probably just to effectively manage that process and make sure you arrive to this point with the people that you work with, or your turf manager delivering probably the daily deliverables, but you're just there to get to this point. But managing the impact on the club as a whole or on your customer, this is the role of the GM. Day in, day out, it's all about the people as a GM, isn't it? So managing the impact. So making sure that you take ownership of the program of work. So agreeing the start date and completion. Making sure they know about what diaries, what days they cannot work on, when they can work, what hours, where their compound's going to be. And all this should be agreed before the program of works gets signed off as a contract. I've had many times where someone signs for a 12-week install, and then once they come on site, they go, right, you can't work on Thursdays, and your compound needs to be at the other end of the course because we've changed our mind. And then it's a 16-week program, and you as the GM's already told the members it's going to take 12, and now you're trying to explain why it's turned into a 16-week program. So getting that straight. Many clubs choose to do like rolling hole closures. So maybe have a hole closed for 2 to 4 days while they do that install in that one hole. And having a daily briefing on site with the lead, with all the people that are in the lead of the different teams. Ultimately, that when they're on site, they're an extension of your course maintenance team, so they need to feel like they're part of the team. So you get the best out of them from both sides. And there's another real big reason to have an independent person overseeing your project, so that you don't have to be the nasty guy. You can pay someone else to do that for you, because you can be doing each other favours to get stuff done while they're there with their big machinery that you never normally have on site. You might have a few jobs that need to be done. And my experience of working in clubs and being a member at a club for a long, long time is that information sharing is, you really can't do enough of that with members. Make them understand what the disruption is going to be like. And every good secret, if you want to find out a secret at a golf club, go and talk to the bar staff. So I would really say that during a project, a major install is literally probably the top subject that the members are going to talk around the clubhouse about. This is, if you're a member of a club, you're probably only going to do it once in that time when you're a member. So it is really talked about a lot. So making sure that the frontline staff, the pro shop staff, the bar staff understand what's happening in the next couple of days, which holes are going to be shut, why they're doing it in a certain way, would be something that I've seen the impact when that's done well. That really does deliver a much smoother install, much less stress for the GM, with much less complaints coming his way, etc., or her way. Then when, shall we say, it goes a different way. I've certainly seen that happen as well. So that's kind of a 6-step plan, if you like, to work out which route you want to take, your club wants to take to get to Wembley. Wembley could be 20 years away, or it could be 6 months away. That's the reality. This slide kind of sums up what I've been saying, hopefully, for the last hour and 15 minutes, hour and 10 minutes. It's your most expensive working capital item. It's the control of your club's biggest asset. So that is why you understanding and appreciating where your irrigation system affects your customer and your bottom line and your the efficiency of your staff, both today and in the future, will allow you and your club to be the best chance of success. So hopefully today's presentation allow you to maybe just think about it in a different way to what you did previously. Because at some point, I'm sure at least one of you will be sat in a boardroom trying to negotiate a $750,000 or £1 million deal on an irrigation system. And that's when it becomes real. So I think you'll get this presentation, won't they, Gavin?
Yes, yeah, they'll get a recording of of the session, Alistair. So they've got your details and got your email. That's why I thought you were district manager for Europe, because your email has EU at the end of it. But my apologies for that.
Maybe next year.
Yeah, it's only a matter of time, obviously. So obviously it was too much for Paul. He got called away from work, but that geeky bit sort of did for him. I'm going to bring us back now to the the meeting, so we can have a few more questions and answers with Alistair. Take full advantage while he's here. It's free advice at the moment.
So Alistair, we've recently, I think we've had a new irrigation system put in, sort of 100 yards in front of the greens, the aprons, and obviously the greens. How easy is it to extend it then to the fairways once that's in?
Question. It will ultimately come down to whether in your master plan, your core infrastructure, i.e. your water source pump house area, without getting too complicated, that area, and your initial what we call the main line pipe sizing.
Okay.
And if that is ready, then actually it's not too difficult at all. So you literally would run pipe into the new areas and allocate heads out as you would see anywhere else. If the main line is sized proportionally to allow you to water in that, shall we say, 10-hour window between golf finishing and golf starting or maintenance starting. And obviously the other massive thing is, have you got the water, the physical water to actually, you may well have the infrastructure to actually create, we can water in 8 hours, but if your water source isn't big enough, then obviously you may well not be able to. But
we've got a borehole, I think.
Okay, so you'll have an abstraction license for X number of cube a year. It may well be that you have to irrigate that fairway, you may well have to top up with some mains, which could be 10 grand a year, which could be 10 grand a year. So many other things that you would spend 10 grand a year on to improve the customer experience. Basically, that's the core infrastructure. That's where that master plan comes into its own. If you say at some point in the future we want to leave the option open to add on fair irrigation, then the designer would allow for that pipe size during the master plan side of things.
And one other quick question: when is the best time to water them? Because they seem to do it throughout the day as well as in the evening.
The most efficient time from a watering point of view to avoid any moisture loss during irrigation will obviously be at night. I'd imagine their automatic irrigation is running through the night and they're topping up supplementary through the day. During extreme heat, they're probably topping up with ham hoses, etc. Or are you talking about using pop-ups?
No, they've been using the pop-ups as well.
So there's some other reasons why we use irrigation for maintenance as well. So obviously, without knowing exactly the circumstances, it could be either because it's hot. If it's really hot, they may well be syringing, which is what we call, they like basically trying to cool the air directly above the turf. Right. Where they literally just run a quick cycle, let it cool the air. But equally, also, if you put in like a top dressing down, you may well just be dampening the surface to allow the ball to travel across the top without picking the sand up. And there's some other reasons to use it, but generally, the golfers don't really like irrigation going on when you're playing, so you're changing the characteristics. So if you've got if the system's set up efficiently and well designed, then I suppose the more efficient and more well designed it is, the less you'd have to irrigate during the day. I think that's probably a better way of putting it. But you're not alone, I would say. It's not a criticism.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
So the electricity is cheaper at night as well.
Yeah, often.
Yeah.
And also, if you have got a mains flow incoming to your tank or reservoir, mains flow going in, certainly the flow at night will be a lot faster than the flow at day when they're. Don't try and irrigate at 7 a.m. when everyone's having a shower in town, because the flow will not be very good. Which is why often people have that holding tank to have a night's worth of water before the night starts.
Who does the design of the irrigation system, Alistair? Do you do it yourselves, or are there independent designers out there?
Yes, generally I would say the norm is independent consultants. Some people would use a contractor to design a system for them. At Rainbird, we have the in-house skill set to do so, but well, we concentrate on being a manufacturer of product, making that product reliable, last the test of time, 40 years cycle in golf. So I think trying to do one thing and doing it well is our focus. But yeah, generally independent design, which that's what we'd recommend anyway. There's about 5 consultancy firms who are based in the UK that operate all around the world. So you've got plenty of choice in the UK, from entry level to the same people that are designing the systems for Sunningdale or Valderrama and these type of people if you want to get your checkbook out.
Yeah, I thought it was actually a very good point Stuart made about the, how you can actually build the system up over years if the plan is done correctly. Is really that necessary to go for the full system at the beginning, or can you build it up over years to sort of spread out the payments, if you like? I think
so you certainly, I think that's why that map where it had like different routes. So the quickest route might be unattainable for your club, but you could have over a 10-year, 20-year period, you could, your customer is going to change. What your customer looks like in 20 years' time is not going to be the same as it is today. I mean, certainly members clubs aren't the same, or golf isn't the same as it was 20 years ago. So it's going to be different again in 20 years' time, and finances will look different. Certainly having a master plan, which allows you to do whatever you want in the future, is a wise decision to be made. Yeah, many golf clubs do it in phases. So phase 1 could be the pump house and the main line, and then you start to work on greens, and then you work on tees, and then you work on other bits. But it all comes. The plan for it all to be done was already there. It's just gets built on. There is finance. People do like finance for schemes where you might do effectively like lease a system for 7 years, and at the end of the 7 years you own it. That kind of just to give an indication of costs, just a real rough. So a double row fairway system with sensible elevation changes, because elevation changes really changes the goal when it comes to money. Pumping water uphill is a lot more expensive than flat, and so it's pumping water downhill is also a lot more expensive, ironically, because you build up too much pressure and blow it all out of the ground. You'd be looking at about $750,000. Fair golf, greens and tees system, you might be down at anything from $250,000 to $500,000, depending on the specifics for your club. But yeah, $350,000. And then places at the top end of the game could be spending $1.5 million on 18 holes.
Maintenance as a percentage of the overall cost, roughly per year. 10%?
No, nothing like. No, it shouldn't be anyway. These systems, the product should be designed to last. We don't design. Well, obviously we design products to be for a user to set it up as efficiently as possible. But the idea really is these materials are being used to last the lifetime of the systems, rather than to be maintained, so to speak. But yeah, you'd expect if you had a double row fairway system, I think you could probably have a proactive if you included labour, proactive maintenance budget of 10,000, including labour.
By 1.5%. Yeah.
Sort of. Yeah. That would include, someone going around once a month to make sure the sprinklers are not going in non-target areas and all this type of. Often the cost that people forget about.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. It's good information. Any more questions? Racking my brain as well, because it's not often you get this sort of knowledge.
No. One question is anyone actually a GM now or not? No. Okay, well, are you all working at a golf club now? Okay. So the first question is at that golf club is ask how much it costs to run their irrigation system a year and see if they can give you a straight answer. I bet if more than 50% of you get a straight answer, I'll be absolutely blown away. And then if they give you a straight answer, ask them what their disaster plan is for irrigation. And if any of you get an answer of here it is, I'll be I'll be even more surprised. I've done that first presentation at probably 8 or 9 of the GCMA regions, and I think I've had one person stand up and say he's got a disaster plan in place, which includes his irrigation system, which is quite unbelievable, really.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at the moment, with the sort of temperatures that they're predicting this weekend, and as you say, the rainfall this year is actually less than it was in 2018, which is amazing. After actually Stuart brought us up the rainfall for the year and showed that the first 2.5 months of the year was ridiculously high. But since then, it's been minimal. And so, yeah, of course, it's different in different parts of the country. Ryan's from Northern Ireland, so none of this applies to him. So,
I'm not sure about that. We just did a large project last winter at the Ireland Club in Dublin, which is obviously not too far south, hopefully, of yourself, because it's north of Ireland, I think is the way of putting that. Not Northern Ireland, north in Ireland. Yeah. And I've seen some photos from there in the last 2 or 3 months, and that certainly needs irrigation at the moment. So I think, it's always, whenever you need it. That's the thing. It's one of those tools that when you need it, you really, really need it to be working well. The other thing
I think there's, sorry, yeah.
I was just going to say is, I suppose some of the questions I think you should expect to get from golfers when you start talking about irrigation. So one of the things they often get is, as soon as it starts getting told we're going to put an irrigation system in, members start to say, "Oh, you're going to change the character of the course," and this kind of it's quite a common thing. And I think we all own a car. I assume we've all got cars that drive at over 100 miles an hour. How often do you drive at 100 miles an hour? Just because you've got an irrigation system that could put on, thousands of cube of water a night, it doesn't mean you're going to put it on. That's the skill of your turf manager and what you pay for. He's got a greens mower that cuts at one mil, but he's not cutting the greens at 1 mil. So it's another maintenance tool, albeit a very long-lasting and a dependable tool, but it is just another tool in his armoury to deliver that golf course. So.
Yeah, I think the one thing I've sort of picked up from it is the precision of the maintenance that it allows you to do, and obviously the moisture content and that the weather station you were talking about as well, to get the precise amount of water on precise parts of the golf course, and that precision is really what gives you the sort of the competitive edge, if you like, from the other courses around your area as well. So. Well worth thinking about.
Alice, a question for you. I mean, perhaps I should have asked Stuart, but you might know the answer. Impact of buggies on fairways. Have you noticed that that's a big challenge?
Buggies on fairways. When I worked on a course, I worked at one course which was a hotel-based course. So buggy revenue was absolute king for the golf club, because the green fee was basically just taken by the hotel to put guests in the hotel. So the buggy was how we made money as a golf club. So buggies on fairways, it's great for spring. As soon as you get an extreme in weather, it's complete. Whether it's too wet, if it's too dry, you start scorching the grass, which maybe is what you might be seeing at the moment. You can see where the buggies have driven for days afterwards. Especially if you haven't got fair irrigation, I'm sure you're really seeing that. Ultimately, if that's the customer experience that's being delivered, that they need golf buggies, So for me, if I go on holiday with my mates to Portugal to play golf, tell me if you turn up at a golf course and I say I haven't got buggies, then we're not playing golf, So you've got to weigh it up. But yeah, it's one of the things I always used to justify is if you want to push buggies into, say, October or November when it's still a bit wet, then I want money in my budget to allow me to do stuff to the fairways to keep them open. You know, and it's a trade-off that's got to be delivered. And the middle of summer is no different. If you want to deliver perfect playing conditions through the summer and you want buggies on fairways, then you're going to have infrastructure that will support that, which could mean in your climate you must have fair irrigation.
Okay.
Or your presentation will be affected. I say could quite a lot, because obviously I'm not saying I'm right or wrong.
No.
Yeah.
No. Okay, cool.
Yeah. It will depend on the golf course as well, Stuart. I think you know, if you've got minimal sort of entry points onto the fairway, then you'll concentrate the traffic, the buggy traffic going on that point, and that'll wear and tear an awful lot more. So try not to put the buggy signs here. Let them go wherever. Let them enter the fairway wherever they want, because then you spread it out a lot better. So there's not that same wear and tear. But yeah, it's just.
And that's another example of like valve and head sprinklers, for instance, on a fairway. If you're moving your entry point around, and then you're going to drill in extra seed on the entry point, and then you can then just water that specific area to cover that wear a bit more. So it's the same, you know, the grass seed you put down is only as good as it being standing alive. So that's another example where you can, the buggy revenue is great, but some of it really does need to be redirected back into the course to allow it to. Well, that's the reality.
I think I played a course a few years back now, where you had to have a buggy because of the length of it, but then they said you had to stay on the paths, which is, you know, I get that, but then it's really annoying because you've got to then walk the same distance anyway that you would have done. You know, because you're going by the side and you might be going to the other side of the fairway or whatever. But you know, as I say, I had that experience where you had to have a buggy, but they kept you to a path. So I suppose that might have been to protect the course. Would it have been, or?
Yeah, well, I assume the distance must have been astronomical if they said you can't play it without it. There must have been some massive walks between holes.
I think that's what it was. I can't remember which course it was, but it was to do with the distance from the
I would say that
green.
buggies sticking on paths only. Gav's probably got more resort experience than me, but I would say that that's not uncommon at certain times of the year to say carts on paths only. And, you know, maybe 2 weeks later they had a major tournament they were trying to protect the course for. I don't, you know, but it's not uncommon. But yeah, I think the fact is that you still remember it, and did it affect your customer experience? And the answer is yes.
Yeah.
So if they could have got around that on that day, you'd be looking at it probably more positively than you are.
Yeah.
I think you almost go back into sort of the grass type and the soil type as well. If you've got a very resistant grass species on your golf course, then you can run buggies all year round, and it won't really affect them that much. But you know, the grass that we've got, I think the UK is you know, it's hard wearing, but it's reasonably delicate as well. So it's links courses are fine, aren't they, Alistair?
Yeah, as long as you haven't got too many narrow points. That's the only problem. Links is sometimes the land gets a bit inaccessible, so sometimes you get pinch points. So they've started using other species that wouldn't actually be there, and then there's a whole argument about whether there should be or not, and I suppose it's where you're pitching yourself. Top courses are using caddies anyway, so I don't think that goes that way.
I prefer to walk the course. I would get rid of golf carts, buggies if we could.
I think what it comes down to ultimately is obviously if you want to become a buggy-driven course, then you've got to invest and put the infrastructure in place, or design the golf course originally. But a decent design, the master plan design will be, is it going to be a cart course or not? And if it is, then obviously the grass species selection, the irrigation system, everything should be based around the fact that you want to run buggies and run them everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's when you're trying to force something on. So when you've got a members club, 1930s members club with sort of clay underneath everywhere, and then you go and buy 10 buggies because you want to introduce buggies to the course. It's great for June and July, and then all of a sudden you realise all the problem. You know, the revenue's great, but if you haven't put the infrastructure in around it, you're just waiting for the issues to occur.
Good. Well, any more questions on irrigation, water efficiency? No, I think that's it. So all remains for me to say is thank you very much, Alistair, for on my own behalf and everybody else for that insight into what is obviously a major cost within the golf club and something every general manager needs to know about. So thanks again for your time today. You've got Alistair's details, and so anybody's any further questions for him, just drop him an email. Okay, thank you very much, Alistair. I'll stop the recording there.